All right. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Creating Normalcy for Persons Living with Dementia. My name is Marla DeVries, and I'm the Director of Resource Development for the Greenhouse Project. And I want to officially welcome you to the second in our series, in our Best Life webinar series. Before we get started and I turn it over to Anne, I want to go through a couple housekeeping details. First of all, this session is being recorded and you'll receive a copy of the recording following this session. Second of all, everyone is in listen-only mode. If you need to communicate with us, please use either the chat feature or the question box. There will be time at the end of the session for questions, so I encourage you during the presentation to be thinking about different questions that are coming up for you, and throughout the presentation to go ahead and put them in the chat box. It is my pleasure to welcome Anne Ellett to lead us through this session. Anne is the Greenhouse Dementia Specialist and creator of the Greenhouse Best Life approach to supporting elders living with dementia. And in this session, she's going to discuss the power of normal and challenge us to create normalcy for persons living with dementia. So, welcome, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, Marla. I appreciate all of you joining us today for our webinar, and look forward to talking with many of you. As Marla said, please add your questions, and we look forward to having a discussion at the end. So today's topic is the second core principle of the Best Life approach, creating normalcy for people living with dementia. We think of normal life as a powerful antidote to the sadness and isolation that is so often a part of old age and life in long-term care for people living with dementia. Today, we're going to examine why normalcy is important and how to integrate it into your long-term care setting. So what do we mean when we say normal? And why is that important? It sounds like, it doesn't sound like a clinical term. It doesn't sound like something that we would be talking about in healthcare settings. Why is it important to talk about creating normal? Well, just as we all know, normal means usual, standard, ordinary, usual. So I like to start with just having all of us think for a moment about the things that we would consider normal or standard or usual for us. It'll be different for every one of us, but there will probably be some overlapping experiences or preferences, such as I'm pretty sure most of us would say it's normal for us to be able to go to the refrigerator and get a snack anytime we want. Or it's normal or usual for us to feel like if we want to open the door and walk outside, we can pretty much do that any time of the day. Maybe what's normal for you is taking your dog for a walk or having that first cup of coffee in the morning. So they're personal things. They're often things that don't seem real significant until you realize that they are creating that environment of choice and preference for each individual. So these types of small decisions, small choices that we make, what are the values that these small choices represent in our life? Well, they represent variety. For instance, almost every morning I take a walk to the beach, but I seldom take exactly the same path. As I'm walking down to the beach, without even really thinking about it, I might decide to go this street instead of that street. I might decide to stop here, and I don't usually do that. So we all create and put variety into our day. Choice is very important for us. We decide when we're hungry. We decide when we want to eat. We walk by a vending machine and say, oh, that candy bar looks good. I'm going to get that now. That's my choice. when I want to shower, things like that. Very personal, but they create that environment of normalcy. Common experiences that are probably pleasant for most of us, such as maybe smelling food cooking, or maybe making your own favorite recipe, maybe petting your dog, things that are normal and bring pleasure to you. And then also spontaneity. That's normal for all of us as adults. We get to, friend calls us up, hey, let's go out and do this. It wasn't what we had planned on, but we do small things every day to add spontaneity. So these kinds of choices, they really add zest to our life. They really show that we're in control of our life, that we have the ability to make choices and experience things that bring us pleasure. So these pictures that we're all familiar with from long-term care, they're very sad pictures. And I know that I don't want to sign up for that to be my normal. But for many people living with dementia, whether it's in assisted living or nursing home, often memory care is in a very confining, small care unit. It comes often with a lot of restrictions too about what they can and can't do. So is it any wonder that the average age of people moving into assisted living and nursing homes is over 85 years old? People put it off as long as they can. I've had my own care management business, and when I worked with private clients, many of whom I thought would thrive with the assistance they could get in assisted living or nursing homes, they would refuse to move until they became absolutely desperate and had no choice. Why? Because to most people, moving into a long-term care setting means giving up many of these small, everyday pleasures and choices. Statistics on the rates of depression in long-term care, it's really tough. So nursing homes have the highest rate of depression, but residential care communities, other long-term care settings also. So it's very prevalent. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this okay? Why is this okay? Those pictures of people sitting in wheelchairs all day, where's the zest in their life? Where's the spontaneity? Where's the choice? Well, sometimes this has been allowed to be okay because the devaluation of people living with dementia. I don't know if any of you on the line that are working in nursing homes or assisted livings, and you tell people what you do, and often people will say to you, oh, well, bless you for what you do. I couldn't work with those people. I couldn't work in that place, but good for you for doing that. So we know that people who are experiencing dementia are devalued. We know that over 50% of people living with dementia have experienced some type of abuse, usually emotional abuse, but it could be other types of abuse also. People living with dementia are often treated as children, and professionals focus on what they can't do rather than on their retained abilities. So think about how all of you would feel if everyone around you identified you by what you can no longer do. For example, myself, I used to be a really good tennis player. Today, I don't play tennis as well as I used to. But so what if everyone said, oh, poor Anne, she used to be able to win tennis tournaments, but she doesn't do that anymore. Instead, my friends are saying, hey, way to go. You still play tennis great. They're looking at what I can still do instead of comparing me to my 20-year-old. And so often us as professionals, we hear the word dementia, that diagnosis is on someone's chart, and we immediately make assumptions about what they can't do. So 1 in 4 people with dementia hide their diagnosis because of the stigma that they know is attached to it. I don't know if anyone here has been in a social setting where someone will come up to you and they'll go, they hear what you do and they'll come up and they'll go, "Oh, I was diagnosed 6 months ago with Alzheimer's disease, but I'm not telling anybody." Or we'll hear that with people who are celebrities who get the diagnosis, they hide it for as long as they can. There's a stigma, there's a shame with it. So it's been acceptable to have people who are living with dementia to segregate them and to isolate them from other people, those locked memory care units. So what does that say about how we value them if we say we need to lock them up and separate them from other people? So what are some of the stereotypes of people with dementia? That they're all the same. You get the word dementia put on you, and immediately everybody assumes you're incapable of almost everything. You lose a lot of your rights, you lose a lot of your decision-making rights are taken away. People often assume that people living with dementia can't learn new things, which is not true at all. It's so delightful to work with some of the elders who are living in the greenhouse homes and see the things that they're still learning and experiencing. Often people say, "Well, she has dementia, she won't really know the difference. So we can let her wear that dirty blouse all day. We don't need to change it. She spilled her coffee on it this morning, but we don't really have time to change it. She won't really know the difference." So that's another way they show that they devalue them. There is the belief, absolutely, that people must be confined for their own good. It's okay to lock them up. They need to be confined. There's the belief that people living with dementia don't have the same needs that we have, and that it's okay if we make all the decisions for them. So I think all of us that work in the area of long-term care, that work with people living with dementia, it's important that we examine some of the beliefs and traditions that we've been taught or that are repeated to us about dementia, and so that we say there's another way. I know that CMS, which regulates the nursing homes, in April, just last month, they came out with a new 5-point plan, and it's about tougher enforcement in nursing homes. And they're going to strengthen their oversight. They're intensifying the supervision of how safety issues and around elder abuse in nursing homes. They want to enhance enforcement, strengthening policies, holding nursing homes more accountable. They want to increase transparency, publicizing instances in which CMS puts penalties on nursing homes and make this information more readily accessible to the public. They want to improve quality, and they are targeting quality of life issues for people living with dementias. And Ms. Verma, the head of CMS, does say that always we want the patients over the paperwork. So I think while at one hand, CMS enforcing and being stricter with enforcement can make some of us be more fearful. It also, I think, if we look at what are we doing to improve the quality, what are we doing to put the patients, that person, over the paperwork, that CMS is going to support us. So we don't want to become paralyzed and say, well, we can't do this in our nursing home, or we can't do that. We can't let regulations increase our fear. Regulations are meant for a better experience for the person in the nursing home, not just to create more rules. So when I travel around the country, I always try to visit memory care units in assisted livings and nursing homes. I just drop in and ask for a tour if they have time. And often staff will brag about their survey results if they've had good results. But when I look around at where they're showing me, I often find that there's not any real correlation between a good survey result and quality of life. I've been in some places that probably were so regulated, got such perfect scores on their survey, but I look around at the life they're offering the people living with dementia there, and it's not a life that really has choice or is personalized. So those of us that are working in the long-term care environment, we want to think about, are the changes we make, are they resulting in better, more meaningful, more normal life for your residents, for your people? Not just that you're meeting the regulations, but is it bringing more meaning to the people living in your long-term care? Marla referred to the Best Life approach, which is what we use in our greenhouse homes. It's a very innovative approach to supporting people living with dementia. And there's really two main areas of focus in the Best Life approach. One is being aware of our own misperceptions about people living with dementia. What do we think? Do we think that it's okay for them to be confined all day? Do we think that they can't learn? Do we think that they can't have real relationships? So I ask all of us to dig deep and be aware of what our own perceptions are of people living with dementia. And the second area of focus then is really how can we change the culture surrounding supporting people living with dementia. So our misperceptions, beliefs, and fears come from our traditional training. I'm trained as a nurse, and I can tell you about the only thing that I was trained when I went to nursing school when it had to do with caring for older adults was to be sure that they didn't fall. So let's tie them in the chairs, or let's keep them in the chairs all day. Let's be sure they didn't fall. It wasn't anything about giving them quality of life. We were trained that a bad outcome and any type of injury, any type of unexpected outcome was a bad outcome. I certainly was trained that it really make a difference. They're not going to know one way or the other. And it resulted in a lot of policies and procedures in long-term care that definitely put the clinical over the person. So we like to say in the Best Life approach that we can't cure dementia. There is no cure. Unfortunately, the medical community has not made progress in curing dementia. And they've gotten better at diagnosing it, but they have not been able to come up with any cures. So really all we can do is try and offer a culture of normalcy to the people living with dementia. So when you think about where you all work, whether it's in a greenhouse home or it's in another assisted living or nursing home somewhere, is your workplace, is your culture there? Is it open to change and innovation and creating normalcy and choice for the people living there? Or does the risk management department really determine what the culture is? So probably most places hopefully have a little bit of both, but I do know that some places are real heavy on the risk management department. They're really dictating a lot of what the culture is there. So earlier in this webinar, I asked all of you just to take a minute and think about the types of things that are normal and meaningful for you in your everyday. Is it going for a walk with your dog? Is it having that cup of coffee at a special time in the day? So this is a survey that was done of over 200 people who were living with dementia. And they were able to articulate what they hoped for their future. And on this painting, you'll see different values that they said were important to them and what their hopes were as they progressed with dementia. And one is they still wanted to be recognized as being themselves. If I'm living with dementia, I still want people to know this is Anne. This is Anne. We know about her. We know her background. We know what's normal for Anne. They also said that they wanted to be with. They wanted to be able to have relationships. They wanted to be with the people they loved. They wanted to be with other people. They said that seeking freedom was important, and I think that's such an important one. I ask all of us to think about where we work, and if this is a value for people living with dementia, does your workplace environment, does it support people living with dementia to have freedom? In whatever way you want to define that, whether it's being able to sleep as long as they want to sleep, or whether it's they want to get up in the middle of the night and have a snack, or if they want to go out and feel the sun on their face during the day. Does your work environment support people living with dementia to have some freedom in their life? They wanted to have a balance. They didn't want it all to be medical and clinical as they progressed in dementia. They wanted to be able to still enjoy things. They wanted to make a difference. They said that we know we can still contribute. We want to have purpose. We want to make a difference. We want to continue to learn and grow, learn new things, which again, I ask you to look around. Do we really offer that in many of our long-term care settings? And then maybe most of all is having fun, being able to have that good laugh, really have fun, be creative, do something new. So normalization, the term normalization, I don't know how many of you have heard that term or are familiar with it. It comes from a social movement based on the proposition that the quality of life increases as one's access to culturally typical activities and settings increases. Now that's a pretty long, convoluted sentence there, but think about it. Those personal preferences and pleasures I asked you to think about that were personal for you, whether it's having that cup of coffee, walking your dog, going outside, getting a snack, whatever it is, the quality of your life increases as you have access to those typical activities. So Marla does a great exercise in some of her classes, education classes for the greenhouse homes, where she asks people to write down 3 different things that are important to them, personally important to them, each one on a separate piece of paper. And then someone comes by and just randomly takes one of those pieces of paper away from you and says, oh, you don't have access to that one anymore. And then someone else comes by and says, oh, that one's gone too. You're not allowed to do that one anymore. So you can see how the quality of your life would decrease if the cultural typical activities and settings that were meaningful to you, you were deprived of them. So let's not pretend, this isn't normal for us, so let's not pretend that it's normal for people living with dementia. It's not okay, and it's not normal. So what are the things that we can do to create more normalcy for people living with dementia? And one of the things that I think is very important, and there's been studies that show that it brings so much meaning, is integration with the larger community. What do we mean by that? Well, if you think of many memory care areas are either a locked unit at the end of a hallway in an assisted living, or a special wing in the nursing home, or maybe it's a greenhouse home that's been designated as just memory care. I think we have to all stop and say, isolation isn't normal. We all seek out contact with new experiences. We all seek out having conversations, relationships with people. We're social, and that inquisitive nature doesn't stop just because someone has dementia. And we recognize that maybe the place you work is very beautiful, maybe it's new and clean and really lovely decorated, and and it's really quite a nice place. But if people are confined in it, if they can't go in and out, if they don't have that choice, that freedom, then it's not normal. You're isolating them. It can't meet the needs of all people all the time, no matter how lovely it is. You can think of like maybe going to the nicest hotel that we can think of, but if we were never able to leave, we would start to feel very confined. So integrating with the larger community. And it also helps to break down the stigma that's associated with dementia. If we isolate people and keep them behind a locked door, it perpetuates that misperception that it's not safe to let people out, that no one would want to interact with them, that there's something abnormal or wrong with this group of people if we keep them isolated. So just a couple ideas here of that people have shared with me that they have done to help break down the isolation and integrate with the larger community. I just wanted to share a couple ideas with all of you. One place has the local high school jazz band coming to rehearse in their nursing home every week. So how great is that? Or a mother and toddler playgroup come every week to share cookies and milk. Another place had the junior high public speaking class come in to practice their speeches. So, you know, this interactions with people on the outside, and they're exposed to new people and new ideas. Another place took the elders out to a local park and helped clean up the local park, those that wanted to participate in that. And just another one that I thought was really fun, it was an assisted living that had a memory care area, and there was a grade school down the street. So the residents of the memory care area, they got a bunch of lemons and made lemonade, and then they put a lemonade stand out in the front lawn where all the school kids walked by on their way home, and they gave them free lemonade as they walked home. And I thought, what a great idea that is. So there are lots of ways that we can think of integrating with the larger community that don't have to cost you money. It doesn't mean you have to hire someone to come in, but there's often opportunities in our communities nearby. We can see that if we can combat the isolation that so many people experience when they move into a nursing home or into a memory care area, that is one of the fears, is that when they move in, they're never going to leave. They're never going to get out, that their friends aren't even going to want to come visit them. So anything we can do to break down that isolation and stigma. So age-appropriate interactions, that's another thing that we can do to create normalcy and break down isolation and stigma. So what do we mean by that? We know that how a person is perceived influences not only how that person is treated, but also how that person behaves. And just a quick comparison, most of us have heard of studies done with young grade school children, and they did a study where some young students who were very intelligent, doing very well in school, but when they got ready to transfer to the next grade in school, that next teacher was told that these children were troublemakers. The teachers were told that these kids were not accomplished, did not do well in their studies. And so the teachers had the misperception, and guess what? These children began to behave to fulfill the perception that the teachers had. So if we look at a person living with dementia and say in our own mind, oh, that person probably couldn't do that, oh, that person probably wouldn't be interested in that, guess what? They began to lose that interest and not participate. So if a person is perceived as unable, the more likely they will be unable to successfully achieve goals. And so I think it's important as we think about dignity and honoring people who are living with dementia. For lack of a better word, I use props, but if I'm going to hand an older woman something, I'm not going to hand her a child's toy that then people could think, oh, this woman is very childlike, which is incorrect. I would much rather hand her, for instance, maybe a woman's purse that was full of interesting things that she could explore, but it was age appropriate. There was nothing in that object that I handed her that would make her seem childish or less than an adult. People living with dementia don't deserve to be treated as children. They are all adults who've led full and interesting lives. So maybe some of you on the call today work at places where they have baby doll programs, or there's also a lot of interest. There's some companies who are making robotic pets, and these are being encouraged to be used with people who are living with dementia. It's considered acceptable. And I have to ask all of you, if you work in a place where this goes on, I have to challenge you and ask, well, why use baby dolls or robotic pets instead of real children and animals? Why give them something fake when they deserve the opportunity for real experiences? And I know that these things are offered, these objects are offered out of a desire to comfort the person living with dementia. And maybe some of you on the call have heard me talk about this before. And it's the truth that I have never had a woman, an older woman with dementia, decline to trade me her baby doll for a purse that was filled with interesting things. So yes, do the older adults, do they interact with these objects? Yes, they do often interact with them, but are you getting the real relationships? Are you getting the dignity of having real interactions? So this picture here on the left, this is a woman who lives in a greenhouse home in Arkansas. She's quite far along in her journey with dementia. She's not very verbal. She doesn't interact a lot with other people, but when one of the nurses that worked there handed her her infant daughter, look at what happened. It was quite remarkable. Nobody can take you up. I love you. I love you. So when I see that video, every time I see it, it makes me very emotional. The staff was really amazed when this resident's name is Jan, and when she reacted and began to sing in perfectly clear voice to this baby and rock it, the baby to comfort it. So it was so age appropriate. It was so dignified that eye to eye, eye to face contact there. It was so meaningful and so appropriate. So you get a whole different vision of this woman's abilities and what's normal for her than if you handed her a doll. So I encourage all of us to look for opportunities to have your elders interact with real children, real pets. So many nursing homes and assisted livings now have started a really nice program. And these are just headline captions from a couple different places around the country. I don't know if any of you are doing it that are on the webinar. I'd love to hear from you if you are. but they're fostering kittens from the local animal shelter. So this just is such a wonderful thing. It gives them purpose. It gives them the opportunity to have a relationship, to feel competent, to feel that they're contributing. As well as I can imagine they're having some fun here too, seeing these kittens scamper around their place. So there's lots of different ways that you can get real relationships with pets into your long-term care setting. I hope some of you have tried this. The other thing that you can do to help create normalcy for people living with dementia is to look around you where you work. And so often when I go into a place, I see the majority of people sitting in wheelchairs. And I always ask about individual residents, and I go, well, why is she in a wheelchair? Why is he in a wheelchair? And often people don't even really know. They'll say, well, she moved in with one. Or, oh, she's just had one for a long time. Or, oh, he broke his hip and he's just been in one since then. And so again, are we making perceptions, misperceptions, I would challenge you, about people living with dementia, that it's okay if they're sitting in wheelchairs all day? And that's not normal. That's not a normal environment. And while I often hear, well, he likes it because he can move around in it. She can scoot herself away from the table when she wants to. I recognize that that might give them some freedom, but for someone to be in a wheelchair most of the day, first of all, the wheelchairs weren't designed to be sat in all day. They're not ergonomically correct. They're not very comfortable. Keeping their knees flexed like that, you're going to end up with contractures. So I ask you to look around and go, well, why are all these people in wheelchairs? I often feel like wheelchairs multiply at night. Places tell me, well, you know, we had a program and we evaluated everybody and we got most of them out. But now that you mention it, I look around and most of them are back in wheelchairs. So I ask you to have a meeting with your team and say, well, who does really need to be in a wheelchair? Is there a medical diagnosis that would be required for them? And if not, and I think for most of them, there's probably not going to be a medical diagnosis, what can you put together with your therapy departments and with your own team to help someone have the dignity and the health benefits of being able to stand up on their own legs? You might be needing to support them, but stand up on their own legs, be weight bearing, transfer, and maybe begin to take some steps. There's been some wonderful success stories of people who have been in wheelchairs for a long time and now can walk down the hall. So that adds normalcy if we can at least think of maybe leaving the wheelchairs outside of the dining rooms and the person is assisted into a regular dining chair for the meal. So for that time of their day, we're not seeing all the wheelchairs. If you just look at the comparison between the two photos on this page, probably many of those people in the lower photo who do not have the wheelchairs would have been people that certainly in many instances could have been sitting in a wheelchair. But their approach here in this nursing home is that people are taken out of their wheelchairs for most of the day. So often people in wheelchairs for our convenience, it's quicker to wheel them down the hall. But I ask you to look at what it's offering, and is it normal? Is it what you would want as your normal if you were living in a nursing home? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about some scary stuff. Culture change, really. If you think about, if you were to have a meeting with your team after this and say, you know what can we do to create more normal? It's very powerful if you phrase it that way. We want to create normalcy. It's very powerful if you think of your long-term care environment in that term instead of thinking of it like we have to document every fall. Of course, we're going to try and keep people safe. Of course, we have to document falls, but let's put some emphasis and some of our thinking on how can we create normal for our people who live there. And this is a variation of something that Marla says all the time, but I love it. It says, the way I say it, Marla, is normalcy is taken away one small decision at a time. And you can put it back one small decision at a time. We're not talking about having to change everything in your environment all at once. It's those baby steps. So if you were to look around you, how far from normal have you gone? And what could you do to start to move the needle back towards normal? All right, well, we're going to, I think, take some time for questions. I just have a couple more slides here just to show you, but the next webinar on another core principle of the Best Life approach, which is focus on retained abilities, is coming up in a month, June 18th at 3 o'clock. So I'm sure you can find information on our website about registering for that. And Marla, do you want to talk about some of these things coming up, or Meg?
Yeah, this is Marla. I will. And while I'm doing that, we do have about 15 plus minutes left. So feel free. A couple questions have come in, and so feel free to add your own into the question box, and we'll have Anne respond to your questions that have come up from the presentation. And while you're doing that, I want to share a couple other opportunities we have for future webinars. So in addition to the third in the series on our Best Life approach, we also have a new series that we are launching at the end of the month, our workforce webinar. And we are thrilled to have Lori Porter with us. Lori has over 35 years of experience in long-term care and really has a passion and a purpose in supporting the direct care staff. She's the co-founder of the National Association of Healthcare Assistants, and she is going to share from her vast experience how to recruit and retain the best direct care workers. And so you don't want to miss that one. And then we also have another webinar in our Cultural Transformation series coming up, which will be June 4th. We launched this series a couple weeks ago, in which Susan Ryan, our Senior Director, gave an overview of what is Greenhouse 2.0. And we are now taking a deeper dive into cultural transformation and really looking at what is that greenhouse approach for organizations that can't build new for a variety of reasons, but how do you still achieve deep sustainable change? And we're going to talk about our approach to really shifting beliefs, behaviors, and systems, the framework that Anne mentioned earlier, really to eradicate those institutional models and to really leverage the power of what's possible. So I will be leading that session on June 4th. So I've got a couple questions, Anne, and I forgot, we also have a one-day workshop coming up at the end of June 26th in Detroit. So join us at the Tome Rivertown neighborhood, which is a PACE program. If you've not been able to visit a greenhouse home, this is a wonderful opportunity to see it live in action and to hear about how greenhouse homes function, and particularly here at the Rivertown neighborhood to see how PACE has been integrated with greenhouse homes. So I've got a couple questions that I'm going to share with Anne. So Anne, first question is, how do you create normalcy and your idea of integrating with the larger community for those that can't safely leave their care setting alone? So what suggestions do you offer for some of those fears that come up around elders being able to safely leave alone?
Sure. Good question. And I think as people do progress with dementia, the care staff sometimes are challenged on what they can offer to these residents. But I think there are some wonderful examples of getting volunteers to come in and do a one-on-one with somebody who, for instance, is no longer very verbal or perhaps is no longer able to spend extended period out of the home, out of your long-term care setting because they've become quite frail. There are still opportunities for people to have relationships with these people. They can still sit with them. They can still read to them. They can still learn about their life history and their life story and talk about experiences. If you've heard that someone has been a traveler and really enjoyed time in Italy, a volunteer or someone could sit and show them pictures, could be talking about Italian food, could be showing them perhaps pictures and talking about things in different areas of Italy. So again, it comes from knowing that person. At the Greenhouse Project, we call it deep knowing that elder, knowing that person well, knowing what might be meaningful to them. You can know their life history and still offer many things that are relevant to that. Or if a person is too frail to really go out much anymore, that doesn't mean that they couldn't enjoy music, personalized music and memories. That program is wonderful where the music is personalized for them. But it doesn't mean that they also couldn't enjoy going out and sitting outside for a short period of time and maybe enjoying that glass of lemonade together. So I think there are things that come from one, deep knowing what is meaningful to that person, and then looking for ways to break down that isolation, whether it's people coming in to your long-term care setting and spending time, individual one-on-one time with that person, or what can you take them out. There's a great example of a place in Phoenix where the greenhouse homes there, they got some of their people who really hadn't been outside for quite a long time. They got them out to watch the 4th of July parade. And so it was very joyful and really a fun time for these people to be out and experiencing sitting and hearing all the sights and smells and sounds. So I think, again, I encourage you all just to go back. What do we know about this person that would be meaningful for them?
Excellent. Another couple questions have come up with wanting your insights in safety and security. So how do you address concerns either by family members or by staff persons if you don't have a locked unit?
I know. The locked unit, it is the standard. It is acceptable across the country in so many places. And for those of you that weren't able to hear the webinar on the dignity of risk, I encourage you to go in to the Greenhouse Project website, and I believe it is available. We had that a few weeks ago, where we really talked a lot about locked doors. And I think, I've been in nursing long enough where I can remember it was the standard of care to tie people in their beds or tie people in their chairs. And we thought we were doing it for the safety of that person, and it was the standard of what was required as a good nurse. Thank goodness we've come beyond that. And I do believe that the culture of care in long-term care will move towards unlocking doors. But right now there is still a lot of fear about that. And when on the webinar, Dignity of Risk, I talked about if you have a dementia care or a memory care area that, say, has 30 residents in it and the doors are locked. Maybe you have an outside patio, but the doors are locked and the residents can only go out there if a staff member gives them permission, unlocks the door, and accompanies them. That really what's happening is that maybe there was one resident that might try and leave the area, so they locked the doors, and all the other 29 residents were penalized because of the actions of one. So asking us as leaders in long-term care to, one, be aware of our own beliefs, behaviors, and systems and our fears around this, and say, what could we do? Doesn't mean we have to unlock all the doors all the time, but what could we do to allow more freedom and choice? Could the doors be unlocked 4 hours a day? Could they be unlocked every morning? I mean, so what can you as a team come together? And I think an important part, as I said, is one of the big focuses in the Best Life approach is talking and being transparent about our own fears and misperceptions. And really, why are those doors locked? Ask why are they? And what can we do? It doesn't mean you need to go to unlocking all the doors all the time, but what can you do to start loosening those types of restraints? There are a lot of fears. We have to bring the families with us. I hope that all of your places, if you don't already, will have family education forums and seminars where they're allowed to express their fears also. I know one place I worked, it wasn't uncommon for family members to bring in their parent and say they wanted their parent to move in and live where I worked, but their mother had had several falls, so they were insisting that we tie her in her chair so she wouldn't fall. And so I had to go to where they were coming from. They were coming from love and concern, but I had to talk to them about, this is not helping your mother. We can never guarantee she's not going to fall, but here are all the wonderful things that we are doing to help keep her safe. We can never guarantee there won't be a fall, but we do have a lot of things going on that are going to minimize that risk. Our staff is well trained. We keep an eye on people, but actually there's so many health benefits of them being able to get up and move around that we would not tie them in their chairs. So you do have to dialogue with families. And again, you're not going to get them to go from complete fear to saying, okay, open all the doors. It's going to take a while and probably a lot of conversations. But if we really believe that this person has that right to be able to go in and out of that door, then we need to be able to advocate for that person to be able to do that and help educate the families also.
Excellent. So a couple more questions that have come in. You offered some great ideas around giving a woman a pocketbook instead of a stuffed animal or a doll. What similar ideas would you have for men?
Well, again, it comes from knowing that person's history, but some men who maybe have worked in an office or were teachers or something like this, you could give them a briefcase filled with things. But if this person was a car mechanic or worked on the farm, that's probably not going to be very meaningful. So again, it comes from looking at that person's history. I always encourage that wherever you work, whoever your team is that helps to maintain your building, I don't know whether you call them plant operations or the maintenance team or whatever you call them, I always try and get them engaged in providing activities for for all the residents, but often it's the male residents who are drawn to them. And, if they're going to go to Home Depot and pick up a new piece of pipe, well, why can't they take a male resident with them? How meaningful is that? To be able to go for a car ride, even if it's just for a quick trip to Home Depot, how meaningful is that? It gets them integrated, they get to be out, see new things, and then when they come in and change that pipe under that sink, why can't the guy that's living there, the male resident, hold the tools for them or something like that? So I try to get real life experiences that are meaningful for both the men and the women.
Great suggestion. Any suggestions for, you talked about getting elders out of wheelchairs and how so many are put in wheelchairs, and once they're in, they're in. So any ideas for how you would address that for the elders that just really want to stay in their wheelchairs and have some of that learned helplessness, that has become their new normal? How would you encourage breaking that?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's become their new normal because, one, we've encouraged it, and two, they feel like they might be trapped in a location if they don't feel steady on their feet. So they go, well, I couldn't get from my room to the activity room if I didn't have my wheelchair to wheel me down, which means that they're not confident that all of us are going to be attentive to them. So again, it's taking baby steps. I encourage teams to meet and assess every individual resident and say, why is John in this wheelchair? What do we know about this? How long has he been in the wheelchair? What are his medical diagnoses? Is there anything that would say that it's required? And there's very few things that actually require someone to be in a wheelchair. But you want to check their medical background. How long have they been in there? What efforts, have there been any efforts to get them out in the past? And then with that knowledge, then what can we do? And again, it's little by little. You're not going to get him out of his wheelchair if he's been in there for a couple of years right away. But what if you said, you know what, we have this policy now. We'd really like our lunch and dinner meals to be special. And so we're going to escort you to a regular dining chair for your meals. So we'll be there, we'll help you, and we'll have a chair ready for you. So what if you started with that? So the wheelchair was parked outside of the dining area, and there was staff who could support him. Of course, I'm a great fan of physical therapy and occupational therapy, so I encourage you to get them involved, and they'll be able to give you a real professional assessment of what this person's abilities are. Yes, he's able to be weight bearing. Yes, he's able to transfer. Yes, he can walk 20 feet. What kind of support he needs. And that's a great resource for all of us. But it's little by little working with them to help them feel like I really do have options here. And of course, we know what great health benefits there are when a person is weight bearing for their bones and their muscles and their flexibility, as well as even their cardiac health and their brain health because of the increased circulation when they're weight bearing. So there's so many benefits. So it's okay, maybe our goal is that John is going to be out of the wheelchair 2 hours a day for the next 2 or 3 weeks. What can we do to make that happen? And then you're going to reassess as a team. How's it going? What's been successful? What do we need to support him in further? So as he gains confidence and sees, one, that you're attentive to his needs and you're there to support him, and two, he's not going to be confined if he gets out of his wheelchair. So it's a gradual thing, but it's very gratifying. I've had many places be very successful with it, but it takes a whole team approach, from the nurse to the physician to the direct care staff, and then of course with the support of your therapy departments.
Well, and just a follow-up comment is so much of this then is related to the worker safety and worker health with elders that need assistance transferring and the use of lifts. So I don't know if you have any thoughts in that regard as well, in terms of how do you balance the desire to get elders up and moving with the need to really provide for the safety of those who care for them.
Sure. Well, we always, of course, want to keep our team safe, and I think through body mechanics, and we all need to be refreshed on those standards frequently. And so good body mechanics is a great help. And of course, team members supporting each other. So if John isn't very steady on his feet and he's a big guy, okay, the two of us are going to come together and help John feel confident and safe, as well as we're going to support each other, so it's not just one person. But I have seen some direct care staff, or you look at a physical therapist often, I'm amazed at the size of the person they are able to transfer so comfortably and so efficiently while protecting their own skeletal and muscular systems, because they know how to do it. So I think all of us who work in long-term care have received, if not one, but multiple classes on body mechanics. I think every few months it's great to review that, because it can go a long ways towards keeping you safe.
Great. One last question, and then we're going to call it an afternoon. This question asks, is the Best Life program available for memory care group homes that are not associated with the Greenhouse Project?
Oh, what a great question. I love that question. Yes. And it's been used at the Greenhouse homes for a couple of years now. And we're very happy to say that it is available as to freestanding memory care units across the country. So yes, it's available. It can come to your site as workshops on site. It can be given in a curriculum that's like an intensive several-day thing, or it can be offered in one-day type seminars. So it is available, and we encourage you to call and ask, and we can find out what your needs are and design it so it will meet your needs and your staff's needs.
Excellent. And I just want to echo what Anne has shared. One of the things about the Best Life program is, just as she's challenged us for the last 60 minutes to really look at our own beliefs and behaviors and systems, Best Life walks you down a path where you can just look at several aspects of what we think about elders living with dementia. How do we care for them? How do we challenge ourselves to really go further than we thought we could go? And so thank you, Anne, for challenging us today. And thank you all for being a part of this webinar. And we hope that you join us at a future webinar. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.